Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, I'm delighted to be here in Budapest once again and to have the opportunity to speak to you today. I assumed that I would be able to choose a topic that would be of interest not only to criminal lawyers, but also to civil and public lawyers. That is why I chose the following topic: the significance of the principle of legal reservation for establishing the unity of the legal order to avoid divergent assessments in administrative, civil and penal law. Quite difficult. That's what we will speak about these days. Yesterday evening, I found out that I am to give a motivational talk, a talk designed to inspire you to become academic, to become professor. So the question was last night, do you think your subject is really interesting for these people? I changed the subject. I want to speak about the reasons why I decided to become a professor, to become an academic. Why did I study law and not mathematics? This was my question. That was not just coincidence. I imagined that as a lawyer I would have more to do with people than in mathematics. They deal with structures and that matter, I thought. When asked whether I would become a university lecturer, a university professor again, if I could decide freely as a young person, I tend to answer, I do not know. The path becoming a professor is rocky and very, very hard. But once you have made it and reached your goal, there is no question in my mind that being a university lecturer, a professor, is the best job I can imagine. That's why at 73 years, I'm still working as a senior professor and doing so with great joy and satisfaction. The greatest joy in my profession is that I am always dealing with young people who, unlike school children, are motivated to study law. I particularly love seminars because they allow me to find out what young people think, what the generation that will be calling the shots in the future are thinking, and to exchange ideas with them. I'm curious. When I turned 52, my daughter, who was 20 years old at that time and studying medicine, asked me if I was afraid of getting older. I said no, with complete conviction. She then explained to me, I can understand that. First, we students, we prefer elder professors to younger ones, because the elders, they know that you can't know everything and don't need to know everything. Second, she also said that you are always together with young people, which is more pleasant and interesting than having to deal with old people who are mainly preoccupied with their illnesses and dissatisfied. Third, you have to worry that you will be dismissed because of your age, as is the case in companies. You have a sure job. I agreed with her. However, what is crucial for me is working with young people who are open-minded and interested, and with whom I can exchange ideas about my world, and this world is another world than your world. As a university professor, I am also interested in questions and can take the time to deal with them in depth. This is occasionally frustrating, but also very satisfying when solutions have been worked out. The same applies to my work as a solicitor, to which I have devoted about 40% of my time since the age of 67 years. However, solicitor work is limited to specific cases. If I achieve a good result, it is good for the client and I am satisfied. But when I have written a good essay that has brought clarity and presents a convincing solution that may even be adopted by the courts, the long-term effect is much greater. However, it is a rare exception that a university professor can convince the courts with an essay. These are the highlights of a university professor's professional life. I have experienced such highlights in the field of especially in the field of antitrust law. In this area, the European Union can impose fines of up to 10% of a company's annual turnover, not gain, turnover. These fines can sometimes reach more than 1 trillion euros. It is controversial whether the 10% of turnover is an upper limit or a cap. This question arose equally in Germany. In the European Union, they say it's a cap. In Germany, when fines of up to 10% of a company's annual turnover can be imposed, this is a lot of money. I hope you understand the difference between turnover and profit. As a rule, companies' profits are 2 or 3% of their turnover. Nor is it a question of the turnover of a legal entity, but on the company. It is the whole group. The Deutsche Bank Group, to give one example, consists of several hundred legal entities, and you take them together. The same applies to Volkswagen, which includes Audi, Porsche, and hundreds of subsidiaries. If 10% of turnover is the upper limit in particularly serious cases, the upper third must be used as a starting point and all aggravating factors taken into account. The maximum result can be 10 million. Mitigating circumstances must then be taken into account. The result must then be below 10%, 7, 8%, sometimes 3 or 4%. In the case of a cap, one can assume 10% at 5% of special aggravating circumstances and deduct mitigating factors 2 or 3%. If the result is a fine of 13%, this is capped at 10%. Between 7 and 10% lies 3%. That can make up a company's annual profit. The classification as an upper limit is particularly relevant for companies that sell a uniform product, which is not uncommon. As part of my expert opinion, I had to address the question of what significance a statutory upper limit actually has. The principle of nullum crimen sine lege applies. From this, it is deduced that criminal liability must be predictable for citizens, but so must the punishment. However, penalties are very broad, up to 10 years, only 10 years. Well, this is really broad. 10 years imprisonment, up to 10 years of annual turnover for a company. What is the function of such vague penalties? The important thing here is that the legislator uses the upper limit to make it clear how serious it considers the offenses to be. At the time, there were simply no explanations for this in the literature. Spending 2 months working on this question and developing a convincing solution that is adopted by the Federal Court of Justice in Germany is, of course, a highlight in the work of a university professor, one that is more significant than a good result in a single criminal trial. Highlights can also be very simple ideas. When I was in Chile in the 1990s, I no longer remember what lectures I gave at that time. The university professors and Supreme Court judges there explained to me that they had no administrative jurisdiction and that this was an unacceptable situation in Chile. Above all, they had no money to set up a Supreme Administrative Court. I replied that as far as I could remember, the legal situation in Germany had been very similar. A Senate had been entrusted with deciding administrative matters, a Senate of the Bundesgerichtshof, of our highest court. With 3 or 4 Senates, these could be made independent as a Supreme Administrative Court. The academic achievement was minimal. I only remember what I had heard during my studies. I no longer knew exactly how it worked in Germany, but this proposal was taken up, and today Chile has a federal administrative court. So you see, you don't need 2 months of work. Sometimes it's enough to speak half an hour with your colleagues. Such successes are not the achievement of a university professor. Yet it is possible to initiate developments that can be significant in the long term. However, encounters with people are and remain crucial. When I received publication on my 70th birthday, a Festschrift, my many colleagues from academia and practice had contributed to this work. A younger colleague from Heidelberg, who is a good friend of mine, told me that he felt embarrassed at a commemorative publication presentation where the honoree listed all his achievements. I simply said that I would have done the same. He vehemently disagreed and said, no, you did something different. He said that I had not listed my diverse activities and achievements, but rather my collaboration with colleagues, many of whom had become my friends. And he was right. The profession of a university professor allows for many encounters with people who hold very different opinions. As a rule, however, you have intelligent and open-minded conversation partners with whom you can exchange ideas and whom you can meet. You don't have the same opportunity in other professions, I think. There you have to earn money. As a university professor, you receive a decent salary that allows you to live well. And that is a very pleasant, even privileged position. When asked whether I would choose a career as a university professor again, if I were young, I would answer, this path is very rocky, but today I am happy, I am glad that I had and I have this position. Today I have the best job I ever had. The best job is a senior professor who no longer has to perform administrative tasks and can focus on teaching seminars with students, writing articles. In addition, there is the opportunity to supervise PhD students in the preparation of their thesis. And that is also very satisfying work. Perhaps you now understand why I enjoy coming to Hungary and giving lectures to share my experiences and insights with you. I sincerely hope that if you decide to pursue a career as a university, as an academic, you will be successful and have as many positive experiences with your students as I have and had, both at home and abroad. In any case, I cannot imagine a more interesting profession than my own. Hans-Georg Gadamer, a German philosopher from Heidelberg, who is quite famous in Germany, once said, when God Father was having a particularly good day, he created the German professor. And that's true. But he added, but then the devil created the colleagues. And that's true too. I cannot say that about Heidelberg. That is why I stand by my statement. Being a German professor in Heidelberg, at least in Heidelberg, is a gift from God. Before I get to the topic I actually wanted to talk about today, I would like to point out that every professor has his own cultural influences from his country. And German professors love systematic lectures, of course. You know, when 3 professors were asked in Brussels to give lectures on elephants, an Englishman, a Frenchman, and a German, the English university lecturer spoke on the topic, how to hunt elephants. The French university lecturer chose the topic, no, la vie amoureuse des éléphants, the love life of elephants, of course. And the German professor spoke on the topic, the attempt to develop a system of classification for elephants. That is why I chose for today the topic, the significance of the principle of legal reservation for establishing the unity of the legal order to avoid divergent assessments in administrative, civil, and criminal law. Unfortunately, time has run out, so I am unable to deliver my prepared speech. Thank you very much.